Thank you, Meltem, for coming on my show and talking to me.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's
Yeah.
so good to hear from you.
Yes. Could you tell us a little bit about your name? How do you pronounce Meltem, Naz, Castle, and what's the last part?
Joshkun, originally in Turkish, but
Okay.
in Spanish it's called Koskun since the
Koskun.
C is
Okay.
said like a K.
Right. Thank you. So please tell us where you grew up. I take it that you are from Turkey and you spent a good amount of time in Turkey, right?
I did. I did.
Okay.
I'm sort of, it's funny in that I still feel, I'm 33 right now, by the way, but I
Hmm.
still feel like I'm growing up. Every year
Of
I'm learning
course.
new
Yeah.
things. You're a father yourself, and becoming a parent opens you up, makes you vulnerable, makes you learn, so I still consider myself growing up. But
Hmm.
indeed, I was born in Istanbul, Turkey, and that's where I lived the first 14 years of my life.
Mm.
And then things changed, and by the time I was 15, I moved to the US,
Mm.
to a place called Dearborn, in Dearborn Heights, to be more specific, in Michigan. So that's where I spent 1 year of my life.
Mm.
And then I went back to Turkey, but only briefly because I've only spent 1 year there. And then the remaining years of high school, I was in Italy, and then I went back to the US for my undergrad degree. So indeed, the first years, early teenagehood, I was in Turkey.
Thank you. Can you tell us what was growing up in Istanbul like? I've read one book by
Orhan Pamuk,
Orhan Pamuk
of
that is
course.
called Istanbul. Yes, and but maybe he was talking about his life growing up. But you're much younger than him. So what was it
A
like when
little
you?
bit,
Yeah.
yes. He's like my parents' generation.
Right.
Mm, I guess growing up in Istanbul was fascinating. I know a lot of people might say that, referring to their own childhood, their hometown, but the more I travel, the more I go back and say, wow, what a privilege it has been to grow up in Istanbul, not because it's the greenest or wealthiest or safest city, but it's a city of major contradictions. You have the rich and the poor, you have Europe and Asia, you have Islamic history and tradition, but you have the Western world literally penetrating into the city. So it is a very big city that I was part of and I grew up in, and I was exposed to a lot of things. So when you're a child, when you're an early
Hmm.
teenager, this sort of exposure makes you creative, makes you ask questions, makes you think of more, gives you a certain sense of vision, inspires you, and I'm very lucky that I've had that, I feel.
I love how you put it. It's a very writerly way of saying the Western culture was penetrating into the city.
I didn't mean it. I wanted to sound like a human.
No, but writers are human.
Yes, I wanted to be like very Gen Z and very like chill, and it just
No,
came out.
no, it is true though. But I saw beautiful, like really does penetrate into the city, right?
It does,
The
it
Western.
does. I have to be very cautious though, because I still go to Turkey, to Istanbul every now and then, not very often because traveling with two toddlers is very hard. But I do have to admit that the Istanbul that is sort of living and breathing and whatnot is not the Istanbul that I was growing up. It's a very different place, architecture, culture, nature, the way people live, everything. So I'm referring to the Istanbul of 2000, 2002, 2010 the most. So,
So it
you
has
know,
changed quite a bit in 20 years, right?
a lot, extremely, I think, a lot more than many other places.
Wow. So when you came from Istanbul to Dearborn, Michigan, which has the biggest Muslim population out of the Muslim world, right? And
Yes, yes, yes.
I know this because I've actually lived in Ann Arbor for 2 years, and I used to go to Dearborn.
Yes,
Right,
indeed,
right.
it's a crazy, crazy place to go, and I'll tell you why, and I'll try to remember what it was like to be a naive teenager full of dreams and hopes or whatever. So the reason why I went, let me step back
Mhm.
and discuss a bit more clearly. The reason why I went to US at such an early age was because I got this scholarship to do this exchange program for a year in the US,
Mhm.
and you join the program, but until the last minute almost, you don't know where exactly you're gonna go. You're gonna live with a host family,
Mhm.
whoever sort of volunteers to live with you, sort of way. And so, of course, as a teenager, exposed to the American culture, movies, Hollywood, everything. What I had in mind was obviously California. I had in mind New York. I had in mind Boston. I had in mind Miami.
Mhm.
I never thought about Michigan. I
Mhm.
didn't know even it existed. So it
Right.
was like, what is this place? It's like this cold, very cold place. Like I lived like, why would anyone? And on top of that, and I have to be very cautious because if my words were to be taken out of context,
Mhm.
it could trigger a lot of justified concern or disappointment.
Mhm.
But what I really hoped to get at the age of 14, 15
Mhm.
was an exposure to an absolutely different culture, ways of living, to
Mhm.
experience it firsthand. So it was very ironic that I ended up at a place that has the largest concentration of Muslim population. Not that I have anything against Islam, but
Right.
I came from an Islamic country hoping to experience a different culture. And
Right.
I ended up to a place where like the minorities were a majority. So that was very interesting.
So you're
Um,
like, oh, I left Istanbul and I'm back in Istanbul.
I mean, not exactly like
Not
that because
exactly.
the most people were from Lebanon and
Right.
their
Right.
background was such that they left the Lebanese war and the economic struggles and all that. Of course, like the Arabic culture is very different. There is commonalities,
Hmm.
but there is a major difference. Not all Islamic countries are the same. Of course, the difference was major. But indeed, there was that. I wanted to sort of see what it was like to live in a place that wasn't Islamic in any way.
Right. Right.
Just not like one culture is better than the other, but just to
Hmm.
experience that. I was curious. I couldn't. So that was one thing.
Hmm.
I knew different races, different cultures existed in the US, but I didn't know back then what a racial discrimination slash distinction still took place between the white community and the black African American sort of
Hmm.
community. That gap was massive to me. I
And
wasn't
and
sort of
and if
ready to deal with it.
you were able to see that in Dearborn, right?
So technically, Dearborn Heights, which was this
Dearborn
sort of
Heights.
like a more wealthier, more
Okay.
suburban part
Hmm.
of Dearborn, less crowded, more residential. So I went to this high school, Crestwood High School, it was called. I feel like it was a lifetime ago or many lifetimes.
Hmm.
Mostly. The kids were Arabic Americans, of course, but there was a lot of white Americans as well. And actually, the African Americans, the blacks, were a minority.
Hmm.
I know that because then I eventually made friends through after school activities and volunteering activities, and I also ended up visiting their high schools. That were like 98% black or Mexican and whatnot. So I did experience that. Oh, so there is these different groups of people. It's just that every school district who is entitled, who's able to register to that specific school
Right.
comes from a certain race or culture because that's where people like decide to live together with people in their own race or whatever else. So that I felt that, that major gap because in Turkey I never truly experienced that,
Mm.
that was
So,
really amazing.
even though it was quite like minorities were majorities, but you were still able to experience America there, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I did experience the major difference between the sort of suburban reality, which in Istanbul it didn't existed. Some places are more central than the others, but at the end it's a city life. So suburban reality, major part of like all the challenges, ups and downs, privileges that people have in suburban areas. That was very new to me. The racial thing was very new to me. The religious thing also because the suburban white America is also very Christian. That was also very new to me. So yeah, it was I think more than I could handle in such a young age, and I think it took me yet another 15 years of life to sort of uncover, what some of things meant and what it was really like and what that all meant.
Very nice. So you, after living there for a year, you went back to Italy. Is that right?
No, I went back to Istanbul actually,
Okay.
and I spent a year in Istanbul, and then only after that I went to Italy.
Okay. So, and after living in Italy, do you speak Italian also?
I do, I do. I actually got to like a native level, C1, C2 level of after
Wow.
living there for 3 years. It's a long story because I sort of leveraged that to learn Spanish, and because
Oh.
those two languages are so close, so
Close.
similar.
Yeah.
I obviously continue understanding Italian, but like from my mouth, I sort of say things more in Spanish, which is a language
Mm,
I use every day, actually.
yeah. So after Italy, you came to America, right? Or some you went back to Istanbul again.
After Italy, I actually went to the US.
US
I mean,
to
let's be more specific. I always went to Turkey for summer holidays,
right, right,
2 weeks of winter holidays. So obviously, I kept going back and forth. But in terms of my residence, after Italy, I moved to the US, moved back to the US.
all right, and that this was especially for going to get your undergrad degree, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. It was for my undergrad, and guess what? I was in Midwest again. It was
Right,
meant to
right. Not too far from Dearborn, right?
Not at all. I mean, Illinois,
Right,
Chicago.
yeah,
So,
Chicago.
I mean, it was a culture as a city
Yeah.
life this time, but it indeed was yet again the Midwest.
So
Yes.
did you think when you arrive in Chicago, like now it feels like I'm in a big city in America, an iconic city, and University of Chicago is one of the best universities in America. What was that
Yes.
experience like for somebody who lived mostly in Istanbul?
Very, very meaningful. To ask. So first of all, let me tell you why I ended up in Chicago, because this time around, unlike my exchange year when I was 15, I did have more um, authority in
Right.
choosing. I ended up getting into Dartmouth, an Ivy
Mm,
League school there. I got into Duke with full scholarship as well, and then I got scholarship from U Chicago. So I was choosing between these three schools. I got into UPenn, but I had to pay a little bit. I wasn't interested. So anyway, so these were the three schools, and where I lived in Italy was
you're just bragging about how many
yeah,
colleges
this
it
is
took
like
you.
this 10 seconds of like bragging. No, but I mean I was a nerd. I still am
Right,
a nerd. And and
right,
and
right,
also apart from my jokingly bragging thing, it's very relevant because college
right,
education in the US is ridiculously
right.
expensive. So as much as I was interested in getting that quality of education, I wasn't gonna pay for it. No way, I couldn't afford it. So obviously money, capitalism, American
Right, right,
culture,
right. Of
these are
course.
important like elephants in the room, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, the point of it all was that I was in this very small, it's not even a town anymore. It's not like Dearborn Heights or Dearborn. I was in a very small village in
Mm.
Italy, in Duino. It's called,
Duino.
it's nearby
Okay.
a city, a town called Trieste.
Okay.
So I knew it very clearly that as much as I enjoy the village life,
Mhm.
I did not want to go to a village like a college campus that is remote, removed from a major city with a culture of its own. So I knew that Dartmouth was like in a wilderness because
Mhm.
I was there before when I was traveling, and Duke had walls around it. And
Right.
so I really wanted a place that embraced the city life with theater, food, museums, culture, many things. So this is why,
Mm.
despite the terribly cold winters that I knew I was gonna get, I ended up in Chicago.
Okay. What was the academic experience like? Did it change you? Did it shape you in some way? 4 years.
Um, it was extremely difficult.
Okay.
I mean, I don't even know now that I'm 33 going on 34. I don't know if it were difficult necessarily, or in that because I was such a perfectionist, I want
Mm.
to get an A plus in everything. And I was so nerd that I got a 4 years degree in 3 years and a half because I had some college
So credits.
credits
Mhm.
getting from my international baccalaureate program in high school, and I did the top like the um, highest number of courses you can get every semester. So I ended up graduating earlier even. So in that case, I was like pushing myself so hard to do things the fastest, the
Mhm.
best, and like reaching the limits, exploring my limits. The place is known for its academic excellence, where like
Right.
hell freezes,
Mhm.
and when you come from Turkey, of course, I'm going to be generalizing. Not everyone will feel that way, but Turkey has this thing of obsession with academic excellence.
Mm.
Kids go into nationwide exams just to get into high school, something that is even more stressful than
Mhm.
getting SATs, um, and like a university level thing we expect from eighth graders to do.
Mm.
So we go through this ridiculous thing where it is in everyone's minds that academia is everything. If you don't get a great degree, you're gonna die. So clearly it's not true. Nothing is guaranteed, and like academia is not everything. There's so many different definitions of success, but
Mm.
I had internalized that, and I wasn't distanced enough from it to be critical of it. And
Mm.
so I was, I had chosen the hardest school I could humanly choose, and I applied myself the hardest criteria to go
Mm.
through it. This is, I think, the pure truth. Had I have fun, of course, it was so much fun. There were college parties, amazing people I met, amazing places I
Mm.
went to. So obviously, I was a human, and I had fun.
Right.
But I think my experience compared to the typical American college experience was like
Mhm.
extremely academically rigorous, I would say.
So you made your goals much higher, like for than normal people to achieve, right? And that what made it higher, have difficult, more difficult than it
I
should
would
have been.
definitely say so. And not to sound like because I'm excellent, I expect excellence from myself, but like
Mhm.
looking back at my, 19-year-old self, 20-year-old self, now that I'm 33, I do know that it came from sort of a need to build my self-esteem because I sort of had my self-worth sort of dependent on my performance and my grades and the school I go to, the scholarship I get. So it was that. But if you actually link it back to the American culture, it's also very American, right? It's not
Mhm.
just Turkish, because this capitalism, the performance, and you gotta do well, and you have to keep on pushing, keep on going, competitive, all of that. Like this is actually very Turkish but also very American.
I
So
think
I both.
America rewards you if you work hard. So that's what
Definitely,
America.
that's the mantra. That's
Right.
the
Right.
mantra. And I was an excellent candidate, and I actually bought it. I don't buy it anymore, by the way, and hence I don't live in the US anymore.
Right. Right. Right.
But that part is still somewhat there, right?
So you do you think you're I wouldn't want I don't want to say that your mind was not already open, but did it all like opened it more, like were you able to think in different ways after 4 years in Chicago after the academic degree?
Um, So as a nerd,
Hmm.
and U Chicago, the American degree, like, you have the sort of notion of the life of the mind and
Hmm.
everything. So obviously, I was extremely satisfied with every single day that brought me new ways of thinking.
Hmm.
Honed my skills in asking questions, argumenting, writing compelling essays, and going into the root of things. And so that was really, really helpful. The other thing that is, I think, uniquely American is to get this liberal arts degree, because
Right. Right.
many countries in the world, I think India is no exception, Turkey is no exception, except for just maybe one or two schools. You sort of decide from high school onwards the kind of focus you're going to have. And
Hmm.
then your college already has this very specific degree with very specific curriculum. Whereas in the US, you don't have to know what major you're going to get. And you
Right.
can change it, and you have sort of all kinds of classes you can get. And for a curious mind like mine, it
Hmm.
was a blessing, of course.
Do you think your writing got better? I mean, because you were able to, you were allowed to, or there was opportunity for you to think. Writing is thinking, and
Definitely,
right,
definitely.
and your writing became, it reached new levels in 4 years. Is that true?
Interesting. I guess I would definitely say that the writing I have today, whether it is writing Medium articles that in latest years gained a lot of success and appeal in the UX research community,
Mhm.
that as well as how I crafted over the years my UX research reports and
Mhm.
whatnot. A lot of it clearly has to do with my U Chicago degree.
Mhm.
Definitely not that I was studying UX research, because I didn't even know UX research, working as a UX researcher in tech, like
Mhm.
that concept, I wasn't even aware that it existed. But the whole thing of you know um, building arguments,
Mhm.
counter arguments, describing the context, understanding what are the underlying assumptions, refuting certain claims, how to bring in evidence, when to bring in evidence, in what shape or form. So all the sort of, one can at the end call storytelling
Mhm.
in social sciences, and really doing courses from social psychology. My degree is in comparative human development, so I've done a lot of evolutionary biology, a lot of cultural anthropology, all of that to understand the nature of human beings. Yeah,
Mhm.
it definitely marked how I think today or how I evaluate the works of others and whatnot. So it was clearly
You're sounding very much like a coach.
I am I do that. I do that too. Yeah,
Let's
but
move on to the next subject, which
okay.
is your current Mel's Tech Writing Lab. Tell me all about that.
Thank you. I mean, the name and everything is extremely new, but
Mhm.
I've been building on this notion for over a year. You might have heard, because it's also a reality in the US, that there's been tech layoffs.
Mhm.
People in different disciplines within tech companies across the globe have
Right.
been laid off. So right now, people in tech,
Mhm.
I think the reality is that they're either laid off or they know that they might be laid off anytime, and this is independent from their performance, how hard they work. That just doesn't apply, and I think everybody gets it. So right now, this is a very frightening, difficult, weird time to live, to work, whatnot.
Mhm.
And I felt, because of all of that, that it's ever more important for people in tech, whether it is people who want to get into tech or they're already in tech, to own their narratives, right? To be able
Mhm.
to share their story, understand, and be able to express what they care about, how they feel about their work and whatnot, with their own words, in a clear, consistent, compelling way, in obvious things that we discuss, being able to have their unique perspective and share it for the others, build their own brand, whether they choose to work in a company or go off and be freelance or business of their own. I think this is very important, that we all understood in tech that we're not protected anymore
Right.
by a certain like institution, a great brand and whatnot. So we gotta be our own brands. We gotta be able to share our own stories, whether it is a cover letter to apply for a job, whether it is to discuss a very important novelty in our field in tech. Whatever it is, we gotta really improve our storytelling. And I
Mhm.
feel very strongly about that after experiencing
Mhm.
learnings from my Medium account that reached
Right.
many audiences, made waves in the
60
UX
plus
research.
thousand viewers, right? 60,000 plus viewers.
Yes, yes, it was so. Fast Company reached out to me to
Mhm.
feature the article, but before that, it was all over the place. It got something close enough to my monthly salary where I worked full time back then,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, I was like, "What is that?" And like I was like, "Okay," and then it became even more interesting. Like startups started to contact me. They're like, "Hey, we want to have your angle." The VPs of companies that were the main competitors of where I worked back then, they
Mhm.
were like reaching out, the VP of design and whatnot that looks into research. I was like, okay, this is clearly very powerful,
Mhm.
to be able to do that. And then there were people that translated it to Portuguese, to Chinese, to
Mhm.
sort of like different like languages. I saw the post going in LinkedIn and another place. I was like, okay,
Right.
this is clearly
Mhm.
valuable. And then I started to be very U Chicago about it and started
Right.
to think, okay, let's step back, because I applied a similar formula to a previous article as well that also worked out well. I
Mhm.
was like, so what is about these pieces that make it work? What
Mhm.
is about the topic, how I highlighted the topic, how I dealt with it, what kind of
Mhm.
questions I asked through these articles. So this is actually something I want to be able to share it with others so that they can
Mhm.
apply to their own passion, their own writing, their own thinking.
Thank you so much. I want to ask you the reason why you are trying to do this, because you know how to write and you're good at it. But also, is there a gap? Is Do you see there's a gap, or there's a requirement where lots of people in tech industry are not very articulate, and they haven't gone to school necessarily to learn to write, and you think that's where you come in, and you can teach them how to write and think and learn about themselves and how to communicate.
There
Yeah.
clearly is a gap, because after my articles got boosted, and to give the reference, Medium platform boosts articles that they believe there's a unique perspective, there's a lot of value to be gained, so they overshare it across platforms. across different readers that follow or not follow you. So they actually boost the articles. The last 5, 6 articles I've been writing, they're always being boosted. The gap is indeed there in that. Um, after I publish, I always have my LinkedIn account, which is the main social media channel that I use.
Right.
A lot of people got to me. They're like, I also want to write, but I feel very shy, or I start, but I don't know how to continue. I'm worried how my current employer would feel about it. Um, I don't know if I have a relevant enough angle to share. I'm lost, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of people that proactively have reached out to me to sort of say that they are interested, and then that they find it hard to sort of go end to end with their writing. That's number one. Number two is the sentiment of insecurity and fear that I do recognize that people feel in tech for all the right reasons, because of the layoffs, the job insecurity, and sort of like how unfair it all feels. And it feels like obviously the tech companies have a lot of power because they are the ones that invite you to leave or fire you, or just one day you go in and you don't even know it's your last day, but it turns out to be. So it's very important that as companies make their official statements and like, we're going to be more resourceful or this or that, I think it's also time for the tech folks to also claim their own narrative and find ways to make sense of things for themselves and the others, whether it is applying to their own career, that is their most important product, but also for the sort of things that they deal with within their own discipline. So there is indeed a need, based on the feedback I get from the people that respond to my writing, as well as sort of the helplessness or desperation that sometimes I see in people in applying to 2,000 jobs and still being unemployed for over a year or whatnot. Like there's a need to be able to verbulate in a compelling, clear, and consistent way their experiences in tech.
Right. And you are currently based in Barcelona, Spain, right?
Yes.
But you are willing to and want to help people all around the world, not just in Spain, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, I do. And actually,
Okay.
that's interesting enough. My calendar as a mother of two toddlers works great because I have this rhythm where in the mornings I drop them off school, then I work a little bit. I have some clients I coach. I write my content. I also teach at a local university as a professor in the
Right.
digital business degree, undergrad degree. So I do also a little bit of that as well. And after putting my kids to sleep, the same way that we're doing now, I also open up my calendar. And this is actually a good time for those in the US and other locations to, outside of my local time zone, to have a reasonable time during their afternoon to speak with me.
Why you work very hard?
I don't know if it's hard reason, but I work different. Like normally, maybe at 4:30, 5 p.m., people are still working, but I'm taking
Right.
my kids, I'm spending
Right.
time with my kids, I'm having dinner with them. And when people are sort of resting, I go back to work. I have a different cycle.
Right. 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 Well, is there anything else you want to tell me about your writing lab? You also looks like you also coach people in tech for
Yes, in UX
yeah,
mostly,
yeah.
UX research, also some designers, and also people who are transitioning from academia to UX. I think that's also a big part. What would I say? Like, I think if it is encouraging for people, what I'm going through is also something that is very new to me, meaning that I've always either studied full time. And then I also had side hustles, like I interned, I volunteered, I had side gigs, or I had a full time job, right? So this is the first time in my life that I'm registered as a business of my own. I have these initiatives. Some of them will work really well. Some of them will need to be adjusted. It's very exciting, but also very
Right.
uncertain, at times fearful, but it's totally okay. Like, why not? I think, I hope that whoever ends up hearing our conversation, Deepak, can also find the courage to follow their own path and doing the unconventional thing. I hope this will be an inspiration for that.
Thank you. On that note, we would like to end this conversation, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you for doing this and
And
making
thank you so
these
much
great
for
stories.
coming. Yeah.
Thank you.